Hello, Happy New Year to you all, and I hope you all had a good Christmas. I wanted to do a blog about flexibility and how flexible you can be with your training plan. I thought this was a good time to do it, mainly because I've been thinking quite a lot about this over Christmas, which is a bit of a hectic time. You're maybe not in the routines that you're used to, and it can be difficult to maybe train quite the way you want to over this period. So ultimately, flexibility is a really important aspect of training because without it, you won't succeed. Life is complicated. There's no way that you're going to doggedly just be able to do everything and not be flexible, or it's extremely unlikely. Too much flexibility, and you're going to lose a lot of the focus of your training and ultimately not be as fit and possibly not even achieve the goals that you want to achieve. So I thought it'd be really useful now to just go through some of the whys and wherefores of flexibility, when it works and how it works, and when maybe it doesn't work, and some things to avoid as well, so that you can really get an idea of the kind of flexibility you can put into your training plan to really, really help you succeed despite life's complications, because life is always complicated, that is a guarantee. So when does flexibility help? Let's start with that. Let's start with some of the useful things. So flexibility with your training can allow your training to really complement your life. Ultimately, a lot of people are doing training as a complement to their life. It's not a profession, it's a sport. Some people it's a profession, but for a lot of people it's a hobby. It might be a hobby that they're very serious about, but it is a hobby, and we want that to complement the rest of our lives. So if you have some flexibility in terms of not doing exactly the same thing every week all the time, you can add other things into your life, and that might be something like a special family event. It might be Christmas, where you want to spend more time with family, or you may be doing more traveling, or it might even be a particularly stressful time at work where you need to complement that and add that into your training. The best way to do this is, of course, to plan for it, and sometimes we can do that. We know Christmas comes every year. We may know months in advance that there's a family wedding, and we may know that there's a particular time in the year or a particular time in this particular year when work is going to be pretty stressful. And we can add that into our training plan, especially if we've got an annual training plan and we've put those particular dates in, and think about modifying our training so that it works around those key events. That way we're happy, our friends and family are usually happier because we're not abandoning them to go for a long run, and we can enjoy the events without feeling like we're compromising other parts of our lives. If we are flexible, this really does increase the likelihood of success. Why does it do that? Because it allows us to be flexible in terms of what we're capable of. It allows us to be flexible in terms of what life has thrown at us. So, for example, it's very, very difficult to train at a very high intensity during really stressful periods in your life, and it can actually compromise both your training and your health, because training is a stress. It's a nice stress and we enjoy it, but it is a stress. So if you add that to other very negative stresses that you might have, you could make yourself more ill or ill. So being able to think about where we're at in life, what might have happened recently which might cause us some stress, and thinking about adapting our training because of that will help us ultimately continue to train, even if it's not to the same intensity, and still achieve some goals. It helps us avoid those horrible injuries and illnesses that we can get when we get overstressed. Flexibility also allows us to train optimally, and what I mean by that is about going to a session prepared and able to do that session. So that can be something as simple as feeling under the weather, feeling like you might be coming down with a cold, and thinking, I'll skip my Tuesday track session this week because that is a really intense session and that is likely to bring the cold on. Or it might be even getting to the session looking at some of your heart rate or your power or whatever it is that you're using to measure your session, your pace, and thinking, this is a bit off, it's not right, I'm not able to hit the power, my heart rate's maybe not going up, and thinking, today's not the day. My body's saying no. In my head, I might think it's okay. My body's saying no. If you do that, not only are you allowing your body to recover when it clearly needs to recover, but it also means that you can come to your next session, your next hard session, ready for it, optimally, ready for it, ready to train. So being flexible is about sometimes being a little bit in the moment, being objective all the time, assessing, not obsessing, assessing all the time, is this the right thing for me now? Is this working for me now? Finally, what that does is it allows us to avoid overtraining. So if over a period of time you notice that you're becoming tired, you're becoming grumpy, you maybe not meeting the same targets that you were meeting 3 weeks ago, that's probably a sign that you're overtraining. Now, you could carry on doggedly doing your training plan, but you will be overtrained and at some point you will break. If you have the wherewithal and ability to be flexible and to think, this isn't working, let me sit down, let me think about this objectively, let me chat to somebody else about who might have some experience about this with them, so that we can think objectively about what's not working, how can we make this work better, when was it working. If you have a training diary, you'll be able to see that very easily, especially if you use something like Training Peaks or an electronic device, a training computer. But either way, having some way of being able to think, this isn't where I should be and I need to change things to get back on track, will help you achieve your goals far more readily than becoming overtrained, because once you're overtrained, it's too late. You're going to need to take quite a lot of time off to recover. So flexibility can really complement your training. It can really help you achieve your goals. When does flexibility become too much? Okay, so there are certain things that we need to bear in mind with training plans in particular. One of them is, that's the cat coming off my knee. One of them is sequencing. So training plans are sequenced in a particular way, the sessions are sequenced in a particular way, and this is to enable you to be able to go to that session prepared and ready to train for that session. So if you start swapping things around, that can affect that. For example, if you decide that you're going to swap your speed session on a Saturday and your long run on a Sunday, then you're not going to be able to do your speed session as well on heavy legs after your long run. That's fact. So we really need to think about sequencing, and that's not to say that you can't swap and change things around, but if you're struggling to do, or you want to go out with friends on your Saturday long run, maybe think carefully about either missing your speed session, doing a different type of session, just an easy run, or putting it somewhere else in the week if you can. If you start changing the session, then it's going to become a completely different session. So it's good to be flexible at times, as I've said. If you're tired, sometimes the best thing to do, if your heart rate isn't responding, you're off pace, is to think, I need to abandon this session, just have an easy run. But equally, if you do this regularly because you fancy doing something different, you're not going to be training the same systems that are in the plan. So an example of that might be if you, a classic example I might add, might be if you miss a speed session on Saturday and you want to do your speed session and your long run, you can't put them together. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because you can't do the speed session at the same intensity that it was originally planned, and if you do, you won't be able to complete a long run. So sometimes you've just got to accept that training's gone. It's not coming back. You can't get that time back. Accept that. Move on from where you are now. That works especially if you've missed chunks of training as well, which I'll come on to in a minute. So if your life is really chaotic and you don't have any routine at all, it can be really easily to be thrown off kilter with your training. So while some flexibility is good, routine is good. If you train and do similar training at the same time on the same days each week, and that's part of your routine, it's going to be far easier for you to maintain that routine when other things in your life are maybe going a bit off kilter, because that's what you do. And we know that routine helps. We know that for a fact. Routine helps. So while sometimes we need to change routine, if we don't have any routine to change, then we'll just miss training. And if you miss lots and lots of training because there is no established routine, you will either lose fitness or not get fit. So routine is important, and having a think about your own routines and what routines might work for you is a really good start to any training plan, because that helps you think about a realistic training plan for you. So for example, if you know that you work long hours at the weekend, there's no point thinking about a training plan which includes a long weekend run, because you're not going to be able to do it. It might be that you could do a long run on your day off midweek, and that might be a good time for you to do it. So, and I do this quite regularly. I just have a little thing on notes where I put Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I think about, right, what can I do on these days? What time do I have? What other commitments do I have? And that helps me plan a good routine, and then I can plan my training around it. There are two ways that you can be too flexible. One of them is that, as I said, you lose routine because you don't train enough. The other is that you do too much, and this is something that is very common amongst endurance athletes, and I include myself in this as well. It's really tempting to go for that extra half hour when you're really enjoying yourself in the hills. However, doing this regularly can lead to overtraining. So the odd extra amount of time because it's a nice day is fine. That's not going to harm you. But if you're regularly doing half an hour, 45 minutes more, or regularly training harder than the prescribed amount in your training plan, so you're edging into zone 3 or even 4 when you should be in zone 2, you're going to A, overtrain, become too tired because you're training too hard, and B, you're not going to be ready for your hard session because you've done your easy session too hard. So, for example, if you have a zone 2 session on a Monday, which is 45 minutes, which you may or may not have, but as an example, and you have your speed session on a Tuesday, if you do your Monday session in zone 4, you will be too tired for your speed session. So it's really, really important when we're thinking about flexibility to bear in mind that there are some times when it's just, you can be too flexible. So it's all about balance. It might be that you're really enjoying your Monday recovery run, and instead of 35 minutes, you do 45. That's not going to be a massive deal. But if you do your Monday recovery run in zone 4 and you do a route that normally takes you 45 minutes in 35 minutes, you've probably done it too hard and you'll pay for it. So it's important to think about the intensity of a session and why it's at that intensity, where it is in your week, so that you can make sure that you're ready for it, and what other sessions you've got around it. In short, flexibility, it's a fine balance, but it's a balance that if you get right will really help you succeed. Do plan ahead. If you plan ahead, then you're far more robust and more able to manage when life gets chaotic. Do discuss and think about changes objectively rather than doing them at last minute. That way you're going to know that it's a good decision. Do plan around life. Don't plan your training in spite of life, because it won't happen. It won't work that way. Life will get in the way. If you want to find out a little bit more about training and about flexibility, do go to our webpage, www.enduranceBikeandRun.com. We've got loads of blogs about training and about other aspects of sport in life as well. There's some blogs about races and stuff, which will help you think about your training, develop your training plans. All right. I hope you all have a fantastic new year and that you achieve all the training goals that you want to achieve. And that it's a happy new year.